The endless darkness of space stretched beyond the window of Ethan Carter's small engineering shuttle. He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, staring at the blinking lights of his control panel. Another routine supply run, another lonely trip through the stars. He had spent most of his life fixing things, broken engines, damaged circuits, malfunctioning radios. But out here, in the vast emptiness, there wasn't much to fix. Then his ship's scanner beeped. Ethan sat up, frowning. A distress signal. Weak, almost dying. He adjusted the controls, narrowing the signal's location. It was coming from a small moon nearby, a rocky wasteland orbiting a gas giant. "Guess I'm making the detour," he muttered, adjusting his ship's trajectory. As he approached the moon's surface, his sensors detected a damaged alien ship. It wasn't human-made. Sleek curves, glowing blue lines across its hull. Definitely Aetheri technology. The Aetheri were known for their advanced ships and elite warriors. If one of them was stranded here, they were in serious trouble. Ethan landed his shuttle a few meters away, grabbing his toolkit and helmet before stepping onto the dusty surface. The air was thin but breathable. He walked toward the alien ship, his boots crunching against the dry ground. "Hello," he called out. No response. The ship had taken a hit. Burn marks on the hull, one of its wings bent. The communication antenna was shattered. That explained the weak distress signal. Then a sound. A sharp click, like a weapon being armed. Ethan turned, raising his hands in surrender. A figure stood at the ship's entrance. Tall, armored, and clearly not human. It was a woman. An Aetheri, no doubt. Her violet eyes glowed faintly behind a cracked helmet. Her silver-blue armor was dented, and one arm was clutched against her side, as if injured. She spoke, her voice strong despite her condition. "Who are you?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Ethan Carter, human engineer. I picked up your distress signal." The Aetheri woman studied him for a long moment, then lowered her weapon slightly. "I am Captain Lyra Voss of the Aetheri fleet." "Well, Captain," Ethan said, glancing at her damaged ship, "looks like you could use some help." Lyra hesitated. "My ship is." "Let me guess." Ethan pointed at the broken antenna. "Your radio's busted. That's why no one's come for you yet." She narrowed her eyes. "You think you can fix Aetheri technology?" Ethan grinned, walking past her toward the ship. "I've never met a machine I couldn't fix." Ethan ran his fingers over the shattered antenna, feeling the jagged edges where the metal had snapped. The damage wasn't just external. The inner wiring was fried, and the control circuit was completely burned out. This wasn't just a random failure. Something had hit the ship hard. Captain Lyra Voss stood beside him, arms crossed. She was watching him carefully, as if trying to measure his worth. Aetheri were known for their pride, their belief that their technology was superior to all others. Letting a human touch her ship was probably not easy for her. Ethan pulled out a small scanner from his toolkit and ran it over the damage. "You were in a fight, weren't you?" he asked without looking at her. Lyra's expression remained unreadable. "Pirates," she admitted after a pause. "They attacked my patrol. I was separated from my squad and forced to land here." Ethan nodded. "Lucky you got away." She didn't answer. Instead, she watched as he crouched down, opening one of the ship's side panels to access the wiring. A few loose sparks jumped as he touched the biometal circuits inside. He whistled. "This is some advanced tech," he said, clearly impressed. "It's half organic. You don't see that every day." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You understand Aetheri engineering?" Ethan shrugged. "Not fully. But machines have a language of their own. You just have to listen to them." She studied him for a moment before finally stepping closer. "Can you fix it?" Ethan grinned. "I can try. But I'll need parts. Your control circuit is completely burnt out, and I doubt you have a spare." Lyra hesitated, then sighed. "There is a secondary module inside the ship, but it's part of the navigation system. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So if I take it, your ship won't fly. She gave him a sharp look. It's not flying anyway. Fair point. Ethan followed her inside. The interior of the ship was unlike anything he had seen before. Walls pulsed faintly, as if alive, and the control panels were smooth, reacting to touch instead of buttons. It felt less like a machine and more like something living. Lyra guided him to a small panel near the cockpit. The module is here, she said, pressing a sequence of glowing runes. The panel slid open, revealing a small crystalline device. Ethan carefully removed it and inspected it. I can rewire this to act as a replacement for the radio control, but it'll take some time. Lyra nodded. Do it. Ethan sat down on the floor, pulling out his miniature soldering kit and a few spare wires from his bag. He worked quickly but precisely, hands moving with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. As he worked, Lyra sat across from him, watching. You're not like most humans I've met, she said suddenly. Ethan glanced up. Oh yeah. How many humans have you met? She hesitated. Not many. He smirked. Then I'll take that as a compliment. She didn't respond right away, but her eyes lingered on him, thoughtful. Minutes passed in silence as Ethan connected the last wire and held up the modified module. All right. Moment of truth. He walked back outside and carefully installed the new control circuit into the radio system. Sparks flickered, the circuits hummed, and then a soft green light blinked to life. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. It's working. Ethan wiped his hands on his pants. Try it and see. She stepped forward, touching the holographic interface near the radio. A faint hum filled the air as the system booted up. She adjusted the frequency and, for the first time in days, heard a clear transmission signal. A hint of surprise crossed her face. You actually did it. Ethan leaned against the ship, grinning. Told you. I've never met a machine I couldn't fix. Lyra's expression softened slightly, but before she could say anything, the radio sputtered and shut off. Ethan frowned. That's not right. Lyra pressed a few controls, but nothing happened. Then, a cold realization dawned on her. The failsafe, she muttered. Ethan looked at her. Failsafe. She turned to him, her expression serious. Aetheri technology does not allow unauthorized users. The system must have locked itself down the moment it detected a foreign repair. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his head. Great. So now what? Lyra narrowed her eyes. Now, we find a way to override the security before the pirates return. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his short brown hair. The radio was working, but now the Aetheri security system had locked them out. He had fixed the hardware, but the software was another problem entirely. Lyra Voss stood beside him, arms crossed, frustration clear on her face. The failsafe is designed to prevent unauthorized access. Only an Aetheri officer can unlock it. Ethan gave her a pointed look. You're an Aetheri officer, aren't you? She clenched her jaw. Yes, but the system might not recognize me. My ship took heavy damage during the attack. If the security core was affected, it could think I am an imposter. Ethan let out a long breath. So we need to convince your own ship that you're... Well, you? Lyra nodded. Exactly. Ethan knelt by the control panel, tapping his fingers against the side of the ship. Well, if it's a security problem, that means there's a way to override it. Every lock has a key. Lyra hesitated. The emergency override is inside the ship, but... She exhaled sharply. It's in the core chamber, and it's heavily protected. Protected how? Ethan asked. Lyra looked away, as if reluctant to answer. If the ship detects an intruder, the defense system will activate. Ethan frowned. Defense system. She gave him a serious look. Automated turrets, high-voltage shock traps, possibly even a combat drone. Ethan stared at her. You're telling me your ship might try to kill us for walking into a room. Lyra folded her arms. That's exactly what I'm saying. Ethan sighed again, standing up. Great. This just keeps getting better. A risky plan. Inside the ship, the dim blue lights flickered, casting long shadows across the metallic floor. The air was cold, and the hum of the ship's failing power core filled the space. Lyra led Ethan toward a locked door. This is it. Beyond this door is the core chamber. The override panel should be on the far wall. Ethan studied the door. No visible handles or keypads, just a smooth, curved surface. How do we get in? Lyra placed her palm on a small glowing symbol. A soft beep echoed, and the door slid open. Ethan took a cautious step forward. No turrets yet. That's a good sign. They moved carefully through the chamber. The walls pulsed with energy, glowing in faint blue waves. In the center of the room, a large crystalline core floated, rotating slowly, sending occasional sparks through the air. There. Lyra pointed to a holographic panel on the far wall. That's the override. Ethan nodded. All right, let's do this. He took a step forward. BEP. A red warning light flashed across the room. The temperature dropped instantly. Ethan felt the hairs on his arms stand up. Oh, Lyra. She cursed in her language. The ship still doesn't recognize me. A deep mechanical voice echoed from the walls. Unauthorized access detected. Defense mode activated. Ethan turned to Lyra. I really hate that voice. Then the turrets dropped from the ceiling. Run or fight. 2 automated guns whirred to life, targeting them instantly. Ethan dove behind a metal crate as the first shot sizzled past his head. Lyra moved fast, activating a small energy shield from her armor to block incoming fire. How do we turn those off? Ethan shouted. Lyra gritted her teeth. We need to reach the override panel. If I input my command code manually, the ship will recognize me. Ethan peeked over his cover. The panel was across the room, completely exposed. Reaching it without getting fried was going to be tricky. He grabbed a metal wrench from his tool belt and looked at the ceiling. I have an idea. Before Lyra could stop him, Ethan threw the wrench at one of the ceiling vents. The moment it clanged against the metal, the turret swiveled toward the sound. Now, Ethan sprinted, dodging another blast as Lyra covered him with her shield. He slid across the floor, reaching the panel just as the turrets realigned. His fingers flew across the glowing symbols. Come on, come on. A final red warning flashed across the screen. Identity confirmed. Captain Lyra Voss. Defense mode deactivated. The turrets powered down. The room fell silent. Ethan lay on the floor, panting. That was too close. Lyra extended a hand, helping him up. There was something different in her expression now. Not just relief, but a hint of admiration. You were fast, she admitted. Ethan smirked. I get a lot of practice running from angry machines. She shook her head, turning toward the radio system. Now we can send the distress signal. Let's hope my people respond before the pirates find us. Ethan stretched his sore muscles. And if the pirates get here first? Lyra's violet eyes glowed faintly. Then we fight. With the ship's security override lifted, Lyra wasted no time activating the communication system. The control panel hummed softly as she adjusted the frequency, her fingers moving swiftly over the glowing symbols. Ethan leaned against the wall, catching his breath. So, how long until your people hear us? Lyra's violet eyes narrowed as she focused on the screen. If the signal is strong enough, they should receive it within minutes. Ethan glanced toward the entrance of the ship, his instincts uneasy. And if the pirates are listening? Lyra exhaled sharply. Then they'll come first. That wasn't the answer Ethan had wanted, but it was the truth. He walked over and checked the radar system. The display flickered but was still operational. So far, nothing showed up. All right, he said, adjusting his tool belt. What do we do if the bad guys arrive before the cavalry? Lyra hesitated, then tapped a command into the screen. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a sleek energy rifle. She grabbed it and inspected the power levels. "We hold them off," she said simply. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're really going with the last stand strategy?" Lyra turned to him, her expression calm but serious. "I will not let pirates take this ship. If they do, they'll steal Aetheri technology and use it to attack others." Ethan sighed. "All right, so we fight." He glanced at the weapon in her hands. "Got another one of those." Lyra actually smirked. "Do you know how to use it?" Ethan shrugged. "Point and shoot, right?" She reached into the compartment and pulled out a smaller pulse pistol. Tossing it to him, she said, "It's more advanced than human weapons. The trigger adjusts to pressure. A light pull for stun, full pull for lethal." Ethan caught the pistol and turned it over in his hands. "Fancy. Let's hope I don't have to use it." Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she focused on the screen. A soft beep confirmed that the distress signal had been sent. "Now we wait," she muttered. The wrong answer. Minutes passed in tense silence. Ethan kept his eyes on the radar, half hoping nothing would appear. But luck wasn't on their side. A red blip flickered onto the screen. Then another. Ethan's stomach dropped. Lyra. She turned, saw the radar, and clenched her jaw. Pirate ships. 3 of them. Ethan rubbed his face. Of course. Why wouldn't they show up first? The radio suddenly crackled with static, and then a deep, rough voice came through. "To the Aetheri vessel, surrender immediately. We know you're there." Lyra's grip tightened on her rifle. She leaned forward and pressed a button. "This is Captain Lyra Voss of the Aetheri fleet. Leave now." A low chuckle came through the speakers. "Ah, Captain Voss. You're worth quite a price. We'll take you and your ship. Thank you." Ethan muttered, "They sound friendly." The pirate continued, "You have 1 minute to surrender. If not, we blast that wreck apart." Lyra shut off the radio and turned to Ethan. "We need to move." He looked at her. "Move where?" "They'll just shoot us down if we try to run." Lyra's eyes darkened. "Then we don't run." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Oh, great." Preparing for battle, Lyra moved quickly, locking down the entrance and sealing the ship's control room. She tossed Ethan a small energy pack. "Here, this will keep your weapon charged." Ethan caught it and nodded. "Thanks." Outside, the sky darkened as the pirate ships descended. Dust and debris blew across the ground from their thrusters. Then came the first blast. The ground shook, and sparks flew as energy bolts struck the hull of Lyra's ship. "They're not wasting time," Ethan shouted. Lyra activated the ship's defensive shields, but they were weak. The damage from before had left them at only 30% power. "This won't hold for long," she said. Ethan took a deep breath and looked at her. "So what's the plan?" Lyra checked her rifle. "We hold them off until my fleet arrives." Ethan let out a nervous laugh. "And when will that be?" She met his gaze. "Hopefully before we die." Ethan groaned. "That's not very comforting." Lyra's lips twitched slightly. "Then don't think about it. Just aim and fire." Ethan shook his head but smiled. "Fine. Let's show them why messing with a human engineer and an Aetheri captain is a bad idea." Outside, the pirates approached, weapons ready. The battle was about to begin. The pirate ships closed in fast, their engines roaring in the dark sky above. Ethan and Lyra took their positions inside the damaged ship, their hearts pounding with both fear and determination. Outside, the first streaks of energy lit the horizon as the pirates began their assault. Lyra gripped her energy rifle tightly. "Stay close," she said to Ethan, her voice calm but firm. The pirate ships fired a volley of bolts that hit the hull with loud crashes. The impact made the ship shudder, and small fragments of metal flew into the air. Ethan ducked behind a control panel. He pulled his pulse pistol from his belt and checked the energy pack. He could see the worry in Lyra's eyes as she steadied herself at the window, watching the enemy approach. "We need to hold our ground until my fleet arrives," she repeated. The ship's old defensive shields struggled to deflect the incoming fire. A loud alarm rang out, and red lights flashed around the room. Ethan heard Lyra shout, "Shields at 30%. Both knew that every second counted. The first pirate ship came into clear view. It was larger than their small vessel, and its hull shone with a rough metallic gray. Energy bolts streamed from it, forcing Ethan to move quickly. He ran to a lower console, scanning the area outside. The radar showed not one, but 3 pirate ships closing in fast. Lyra moved quickly to her side. "I will cover you while you try to boost the shields," she said, stepping towards the open doorway that led to the communication room. Ethan nodded and began to work on the control panel, his fingers flying over the buttons as he tried to divert extra power to the shields. The battle outside grew louder. Explosions and energy blasts hammered the damaged ship, and every impact made the interior tremble. Through the small window, Ethan could see pirates clambering in their fighter craft, hoping to board their vessel. He tightened his grip on his pulse pistol and took a deep breath. Suddenly, the ship jolted violently as a blast hit the rear section. Alarms blared louder. "Shields are failing," Ethan shouted over the noise. Lyra pulled out her rifle and fired at the approaching boarding craft. The energy bolts from her weapon struck the enemy ship, sending sparks and smoke into space. Inside, Ethan managed to reroute some power. "I got some extra juice for the shields," he called out. He worked quickly, his hands shaking slightly as he reconfigured the wiring. Outside, the enemy ship's weapons fired in unison, and one of the bolts found a weak spot on their own hull, causing a small explosion that rocked the entire ship. Lyra rushed back into the control room as Ethan finished his work. "Good job," she said, nodding with a hint of relief. The shields flickered back on with stronger force, glowing a steady blue. The pirate bolts now hit the shield and bounced off, scattering harmlessly into space. The pirate ships hesitated for a moment, surprised by the sudden surge in defense. Ethan and Lyra exchanged a brief look, silently acknowledging that this was a small victory. But there was no time to celebrate. The enemy fighters circled again, preparing to strike with renewed fury. From the distance, a flash of light signaled the arrival of additional ships. Lyra's eyes widened. "My fleet is here," she said, hope in her voice. The new ships were faster and better armed, moving into position around the pirates. Their coordinated maneuvers forced the enemy into a tight formation. The battle shifted as the pirate ships found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. One by one, they began to retreat. Lyra stepped forward and sent a clear message through the open radio, her voice steady. "This is Captain Lyra Voss. Leave now or face the full might of the HFY fleet." The enemy ships paused, their weapons wavering as they received the message. In a flash, the pirate ships changed course, turning away from the battle. The energy bolts stopped, and the ship grew quiet once more, except for the hum of the shields and the fading sounds of distant engines. Ethan let out a long breath. "That was close," he said, leaning against the console. He looked to Lyra, who gave him a tired smile. "You did well, Captain," he added. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting both relief and determination. "We held them off for now, but I know more challenges lie ahead." For a moment, the two shared a look of understanding. In the silence that followed, they both knew that in the vast, dangerous space, teamwork and courage were their greatest strengths. The battle had begun, and they had won this round. But the fight for survival was far from over. The pirate ships were gone. The battlefield was quiet now, except for the faint hum of the HFY fleet hovering above. Lyra's people had arrived just in time, forcing the enemy to retreat, but the damage had been done. Her ship was barely holding together. Ethan sat on the cold floor, breathing heavily. His hands were still shaking from the battle, his pulse pistol resting beside him. He looked at Lyra, who was staring at the control panel, lost in thought. "Well," he said, trying to catch his breath, "that was exciting." Lyra let out a slow exhale, setting her energy rifle aside. "Exciting is not the word I would use." Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, what word would you use?" She glanced at him with a tired smirk. "Terrifying." He laughed, despite the exhaustion creeping into his bones. "I'll take that." Outside, the Aetheri rescue ships had started landing. Ethan could see their sleek, silver forms through the cracked window, moving with precise coordination. They were nothing like the bulky, rough pirate ships. These were military-grade, elegant and powerful. A voice crackled over the ship's radio. "Captain Voss, this is Commander Sereth of the Aetheri fleet. We are preparing to dock. Stand by." Lyra straightened immediately. "Understood, Commander." She turned to Ethan. "We should meet them outside." Ethan picked up his pistol and stuffed it back into his belt. "Guess I should try to look presentable." Lyra smiled slightly. "Don't bother. You already look like you barely survived a crash." Ethan grinned. "Fair enough." A new arrival. As they stepped outside, the cool night air felt refreshing. The battle had left the landscape scarred, with deep marks in the dirt where energy blasts had struck. Smoke still rose from the edges of Lyra's ship, and the faint smell of burnt metal lingered in the air. A group of Aetheri soldiers in sleek, dark blue armor approached them. At the front was Commander Sereth, a tall Aetheri male with sharp features and piercing silver eyes. His uniform was pristine, and he carried himself with the authority of a seasoned leader. "Captain Voss," he said, his voice deep and formal. "We received your distress signal and arrived as quickly as possible." His gaze shifted to Ethan. "And this must be the human engineer." Ethan gave a small salute. "Ethan Walker, at your service." Sereth studied him for a moment. "I read your report, Captain," he said, looking back at Lyra. "You claim this human assisted in repairing your ship and defending against the pirate attack." Lyra nodded. "I wouldn't be standing here without him." Sereth's expression remained neutral, but Ethan could tell he was analyzing him carefully. "The Aetheri fleet does not often rely on outsiders," Sereth said slowly. "But in this case, it seems we owe you some gratitude, Mr. Walker." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A thank you works just fine." Sereth didn't smile, but there was the slightest nod of approval. He turned back to Lyra. "Your ship is beyond repair. We will extract the data core and destroy the remains to prevent any pirate scavengers from salvaging it." Lyra stiffened slightly at the idea of losing her ship forever, but she nodded. "Understood." Two Aetheri technicians moved past them, entering the wreckage to retrieve the ship's core. Sereth turned back to Ethan. "And what will you do now, human?" Ethan hesitated. He hadn't really thought about it. Before today, he had just been a simple engineer working on distant space stations, fixing broken machines. But now, he glanced at Lyra. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. But there was something unspoken in her eyes, something like an invitation. Ethan shrugged, turning back to Sereth. "Well, I was thinking of catching a ride off this rock." Sereth raised an eyebrow. "With us?" Ethan grinned. "Unless you'd rather leave me here with the pirates." Sereth exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "Very well. Captain Voss, he is your responsibility." Lyra smirked. "I'll keep him in line." Sereth didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. "Then let's move. We have a long journey ahead. A new beginning." As Ethan followed Lyra toward the Aetheri transport ship, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of excitement and uncertainty. He had come here to fix a broken radio. Now he was leaving with an alien fleet. Life had a funny way of changing when you least expected it. And somehow, Ethan had a feeling this was only the beginning. Ethan stepped onto the Aetheri transport ship, feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The sleek silver corridors were unlike anything he had seen before. The walls pulsed softly with a faint blue light, and the air smelled clean, too clean, like it had been perfectly filtered. Lyra walked ahead of him, leading the way. "Stay close," she said. "The crew isn't used to humans." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, I figured. Your commander looked like he wanted to throw me back on the planet." Lyra chuckled. "Commander Sirith doesn't trust outsiders. But don't worry. If you prove useful, they'll respect you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "No pressure, huh?" Before Lyra could respond, the ship vibrated softly as it lifted off. Through a nearby window, Ethan saw the planet growing smaller beneath them. The wreckage of Lyra's ship was now just a tiny speck on the surface. "This is real," Ethan thought. He was leaving everything behind. His old job, his simple life. Now he was aboard an alien warship, heading toward the unknown. First impressions. They entered a large control room, where several Aetheri officers were working at glowing consoles. The crew members barely spared Ethan a glance, but he could feel their curiosity. One officer, a tall Aetheri male with short silver hair, turned as they approached. His golden eyes flickered between Lyra and Ethan. "Captain Voss," he said, "you made it." Lyra nodded. "Officer Talon, this is Ethan Walker. He helped me repair my ship and fight off the pirates." Talon studied Ethan for a moment. "A human engineer." Ethan crossed his arms. "Is that a problem?" Talon smirked. "We'll see." He turned to Lyra. "Commander Sirith wants to see you in the strategy room." Lyra gave Ethan a quick glance. "I won't be long. Try not to cause trouble." Ethan held up his hands. "I'll be a perfect guest." Lyra sighed but left with Talon, disappearing down a corridor. A challenge. Ethan took a deep breath and looked around. He had spent years working on human ships, but Aetheri technology was on a whole different level. Every surface looked smooth, every panel glowed softly, and there wasn't a single visible wire or screw. His fingers itched to take something apart and see how it worked. As he wandered toward a console, a voice behind him said, "Are all humans this nosy?" Ethan turned to see a female Aetheri officer standing nearby. Her deep blue uniform had a silver insignia on the shoulder, marking her as a weapons specialist. Ethan grinned. "Only the smart ones." She raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. You claim to be an engineer, but can you actually understand our systems?" Ethan glanced at the console beside him. Its symbols were different from human language, but he recognized a power calibration interface. It was similar to systems he had worked on before. He tapped a few buttons, adjusting the settings slightly. The console hummed in response, and the screen displayed a stabilized power flow. The officer's eyes widened slightly. "Himph. Not bad." Ethan smirked. "Told you." She studied him for a moment before crossing her arms. "I'm Officer Saris. If you're going to be on this ship, you'd better prove your worth." Ethan nodded. "Fair enough. A bigger mission." Before Saris could say anything else, Lyra returned. "Ethan," she said, her expression serious. "Come with me. We have a problem." Ethan followed her down the corridor, his mind racing. What kind of problem? Lyra's jaw tightened. The pirate attack wasn't random. They were after something specific. Ethan frowned. "Your ship?" Lyra shook her head. "No. Me." Ethan stopped walking. "Wait. What?" Lyra exhaled. "The pirates knew my name. They weren't just looking for an Aetheri ship. They were looking for me personally." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Why?" Lyra hesitated before saying, "I don't know, but I intend to find out." Ethan sighed. "Great. And I thought my life was getting boring." Lyra smirked. "Welcome to the real adventure." As the Aetheri warship continued through space, Ethan realized something important. He had fixed a broken radio. Now he was part of something much bigger. And there was no turning back. Ethan followed Lyra through the sleek corridors of the Aetheri warship, his mind racing with questions. Pirates searching for Lyra specifically. That was not a coincidence. Something big was happening, and he had walked straight into it. They entered a secure meeting room, where Commander Sereth stood with a holographic display flickering in front of him. The images showed different star maps, red warning signals flashing across certain locations. Officer Talon and Sereth were also present, both watching the data carefully. Sereth turned when they walked in. His silver eyes locked onto Lyra. "You were right," he said grimly. "The pirate attack was not random. They were tracking you." Ethan crossed his arms. "Why? What do they want with her?" Sereth studied him for a moment before answering. "Because of what she carries." Ethan frowned. "Carries?" He turned to Lyra. "What is he talking about?" Lyra hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached into a small compartment on her belt and pulled out a metallic cube no bigger than her palm. The cube's surface was covered in glowing blue patterns, pulsing faintly. "This," Lyra said, "is why they were after me." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Looks like a fancy paperweight." Lyra smirked. "It's much more than that." Talon stepped forward. "That is an Aetheri data core, one of the most advanced storage devices in the galaxy. It holds information that could change everything." Ethan exhaled. "Let me guess. Top secret stuff." Sereth nodded. "More than that. It contains the location of an ancient Aetheri vault, one that hasn't been opened in centuries." Ethan whistled. "Okay, now I'm interested. What's inside this vault?" Sereth's expression darkened. "A lost technology. Something so powerful that it could either save the Aetheri people or destroy them." Ethan's stomach tightened. "And the pirates want it." Lyra nodded. "Not just the pirates. Someone else is pulling the strings. Someone dangerous." The warning. Sereth turned back to the holographic map. "We intercepted a transmission after the battle. The pirates were reporting to someone called Varric Kane." The room fell silent. Even Ethan could feel the tension. He looked at Lyra. "You know this guy?" Lyra's jaw clenched. "I've heard the name. He's a warlord, a former Aetheri general who went rogue years ago. He's been gathering mercenaries, criminals, and pirates to build his own army." Ethan exhaled. "So, let me guess, he wants the vault for himself." Sereth nodded. "And if he finds it before we do, the entire galaxy could be in danger." Ethan scratched the back of his head. "Great, just great. And to think, I was fixing radios a few days ago." Lyra smirked. "You still want to leave?" Ethan thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Nah. I'm in too deep now." Sereth crossed her arms. "Good, because we need every skilled engineer we can get. A desperate plan." Sereth pointed to a section of the star map. "The vault's coordinates are hidden in this data core. But before we can open it, we need a key. The key is locked inside an old research station, one that's been abandoned for years." Lyra frowned. "And let me guess, it won't be easy to get." Talon sighed. "It never is. The station is in the Targus Nebula, a region full of unstable energy fields and pirate activity." Ethan groaned. "Of course it is." Sereth's voice was firm. "We leave in 6 hours. Be prepared." The meeting ended, and the team dispersed. As Ethan walked beside Lyra down the corridor, he nudged her lightly. "So, what happens if we don't find this vault?" Lyra's expression was serious. "Then Varric Kane gets there first." Ethan nodded. "And if he does?" Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then we lose everything." The Aetheri warship streaked through hyperspace, heading toward the Targus Nebula. The entire ship hummed with energy, its engines pushing to maximum speed. Time was running out. Ethan sat in the engineering bay, working on a small holo device. It was a portable decryption tool, something they would need to access the research station once they arrived. His fingers moved quickly, adjusting wires and circuits. Lyra stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him. "Are you sure that thing will work?" Ethan smirked. "Have a little faith. I might be a simple human, but I know my way around technology." She shook her head with a small smile. "You're not a simple anything, Ethan." Before he could reply, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Commander Sereth to all crew. We are approaching the Targus Nebula. Prepare for possible enemy presence." Ethan exhaled. "Here we go. The dangerous arrival." The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and the view outside turned into a swirling mass of blue and green energy clouds. The Targus Nebula was beautiful but deadly. Lightning-like bursts of energy crackled through space, and visibility was low. Talon's voice came over the intercom. "We've located the research station. It's barely operational, but we can dock." Lyra grabbed her pulse rifle. "Let's move." Ethan followed her to the docking bay, where Cirrus and a small team of Aetheri soldiers were waiting. Sereth stood at the control panel. "Scans show minimal life signs inside the station. But there's a problem." Ethan sighed. "There's always a problem." Sereth nodded. "Varric Kane's forces are already here." The infiltration. The team boarded a small shuttle and made their way toward the station. The structure was massive and ancient, floating silently in the nebula's misty glow. Flickering lights and broken panels showed just how abandoned it had become over the years. As they docked, Ethan checked his tool. "Once we get to the main console, I'll start the decryption. Cover me." Lyra nodded. "Let's move fast." The air inside the station was stale, filled with the scent of rust and old circuits. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. Then they heard it, voices up ahead. Lyra signaled for silence. The team pressed against the walls as 3 pirates walked past, their weapons slung over their shoulders. Ethan whispered, "They don't know we're here." Cirrus smirked. "Let's keep it that way." They moved carefully, avoiding detection, until they reached the main control room. A large holo-terminal sat in the center, covered in dust and broken wiring. Ethan ran forward. "This is it." As soon as he started working, an alarm blared. "Intruders detected." Ethan groaned. "Seriously, who sets these things to automatic?" Lyra raised her rifle. "We've got company." The battle for the key. Pirates stormed in, their blasters firing. The room filled with flashes of red energy as Lyra, Cirrus, and the Aetheri soldiers returned fire. Ethan ducked behind the console, his hands flying over the controls. Almost there. Cirrus shot down an enemy. "Hurry up, Walker." A pirate lunged at Ethan, but Lyra knocked him away with a swift kick. "Focus, Ethan." The console beeped. The decryption was complete. Ethan grabbed the vault key, a small glowing disc. "Got it." Lyra shouted, "Fall back. We need to get out of here." They fought their way back to the shuttle, dodging enemy fire. As soon as they boarded, the ship launched away from the station. Talon's voice came over the radio. "We see you. Hang tight. Bringing you in." The final step. Back on the warship, Ethan placed the vault key next to the data core. The 2 devices hummed, their light merging into a single glowing map. Everyone stared at the coordinates appearing before them. Lyra whispered, "That's it. That's where the vault is." Ethan exhaled. "So, what now?" Sereth looked at them all. "Now we find the vault before Varric Kane does." Ethan smirked, "And stop him from destroying the galaxy." Lyra grinned. "Exactly." As the warship turned toward its next destination, Ethan knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning.